Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This is the first of 4 potential Full Metal Alchemist character reviews. We're kicking things off here with Alphonse Elric, one of the brand new characters added to the game. Quick overview, pretty standard here. The character overview, base and total stat analysis, whole bunch of metrics to look at, all leading up to the report card here to talk some more about his weaknesses, what to look out for, the class and job overview where I go through some abilities in particular, what I value and think you should work on, prioritizing what sets him uniquely apart from other tanks, then talking about the TMR review, my general thoughts, and then all finishing off with some job-based vision card eligibility, Esper synergies, which there's a lot of, weapon optimization too, which has an asterisk because again, he is a tank unit, so there are some things to consider when you potentially equip weapons here. Now, for the character overview, brand new lightning unit. They gave him the unique main job of Pursuer of Truth. He also has Ninja and Knight subjobs. He does use fists and can equip armors, helms, and accessories. So a little bulkier on the equipment side here. Move of 3, jump of 1 as a 90 cost unit. Now from a resistance standpoint, a lot of good ones here. 20% both to slash and pierce. Does also have 10% to missile, 5% to magic, and the lowest being the negative 10% to strike. He is, in my opinion, not a 97 or maybe even a 70 faith unit. He's a 50 faith unit, so you don't have to worry terribly about these status ailments, but 50% to slow and berserk are good ones. Slow is very good for some of those mirror matchups with other Alphonses. It's on its limit break, as we'll see. The berserk is very good for King Mon encounters. And the 10% confusion does end up being helpful against characters like Sadali as well. Now for the base stats, being a tank unit, he does have an exceptionally high amount of HP, not very unsurprising there. He's amongst some of the highest in the game. From an attack perspective though, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum here, where one of the lowest base attacks for a physical damage dealer, which is fine. Obviously you have some trade-offs. He's definitely not meant to be a blow the doors open kind of damage dealer, but he does have ways to compensate. We'll see that later on. From an agility perspective, just slightly above average, but nothing too crazy. No real weakness there. From a dexterity perspective, actually skews a little bit higher on the base dexterity. This does come down a little bit from a crit rate perspective. We'll see that soon. And then the luck is on the below average side things here as well. If we take these 5 charts and kind of transform them into their relative strengths, the HP one is off the charts and he does fall into the top 6 HP pools. So yes, he's literally off the charts here for what his base HP is. The rest of these though, kind of mirroring what we just saw. When we add in the board nodes though, and the mastery abilities, things of that nature, a couple small tweaks here. His HP still off the charts. The attack does take a step back compared to many other units, but that's really just because he's a tank, not a physical damage dealer, so he doesn't get the same board notes as them. A little bit higher in agility and slightly lower on dexterity and luck. Not the end of the world. They do kind of give him all around pretty average stats from the board perspective. 6 agility and the 41 dex and 54 luck are pretty average, pretty standards. Not necessarily an offensive juggernaut by any means, far from it. But we'll see how these stats end up playing into the rest of his kit. Now, from an agility perspective, this blue line here is his agility with other characters, applying the 15% and 8% main and subvision cards. Without any passives equipped, he's basically average with many other characters, maybe just a smidge below it. But when you do equip one of his passives, which does have agility, he does get some relative gain there over some other characters, ends up being just slightly above average. The bottom line is not really a weakness, he's pretty much in par with many other characters. Now from the crit hit and crit avoid perspective, he doesn't have any crit rate percentage nodes on his board, so these truly do scale off his dexterity and luck stats. You'll see the crit hit rate here is definitely below average, and same thing with even the crit avoidance rate, a little bit lower than what you see from many other units. Not the end of the world there though. When you look at the accuracy, this is one of the worst things about him. And again, as a tank unit, not the end of the world, and there are some things to recover from, but base accuracy is one of the worst in the game. And although he does have a passive that gives him some luck, which will increase the accuracy, even then it's not nearly enough to give him any significant bump. Overall, a very, very inaccurate unit. And then from the evade perspective, not even remotely close to any evasion potential at all either. So that brings us to the report card here. Now, I have this asterisk here. The grades are a little more general here just because tanks are so statistically different. I gotta try to find that balance between comparing them apples to other tanks, trying to contextualize some of this. So many of this is just kind of relatively speaking compared to other tanks, but also damage dealers to some extent. Now, effective HP, overall going with an A- for a tank. Very strong effective HP, definitely more anti-physical than he is anti-magic. I'm giving him an A- for the physical and a B for the magic. Just speaking a little bit about that breakdown, the reason why is really just because he doesn't have any significant amount of spirit in his kit. And although he has the 5% res to magic. From a tanking perspective, not having that spirit and magic, that is a hole to potentially expose. Despite the fact that he has the minus 10% strike res, he has enough defense in the physical barrier here that it's not the end of the world. But yes, he does have a 3-time physical barrier, 20 AoE res on another buff potentially, and the 80 elemental chain resistance, which I'll talk about in the ability section when we get there. He does have a permanent 15 unit resistance as part of his dream ability, and no protect and shell, no courage or re-raise, or no big self-heal like many of the other tanks do in terms of regenerating their health below a certain amount. He does have some self-heal mechanics, which we'll talk about, but overall, not as many of the tools as many of the other tanks do. Now, the primary stat, I'm going C-, here, very low overall attack, but between the strike mods being relatively hard to resist against, he does have a dream ability that's a 15% damage up on everything as well. It ends up being pretty decent for overall damage. Agility-wise, I'm going C+ here, right around the UR averages. He does benefit a smidge more than what my comparison showed, just because he does have the 18% agility vision card that just came out, rather than the typical 15%. Overall, not terribly bad on agility. Accuracy, definitely an F here, horrendous accuracy, but does have a 100% hit in his kit. That is a staple to how you want to use him, so he does actually function just fine. Evasion, going with a D, not an evade unit, and movement, I'm going with a B+ here. Superb movement passives to switch up the potential build. Really strong thing about him. And on that note, the passive abilities, going B+ here. Again, somewhat underwhelming statistically, but are great to help him succeed in a variety of situations, maps, and help him do his job. Now, the counter abilities, D, actually. This might be the lowest counter grade I've ever given. Very, very mundane counters. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The overall kit, I'm going with a B+ here. Again, the sub-jobs don't really offer a lot. The main job is very straightforward, to be honest. Good overall utility as a tank, though, and does enough that he actually does his job fairly well, all leading to the final grade of an A-. Now, actually underwhelming as a character to some degree, in my opinion, but there's a ton of external balance things which really do bump him up, and we're going to go through them here. But one of them, his unique item, we'll talk about in a second, the vision card that came out, the strike synergies, some of the element overlap with lightning between fire and wind due to what the dark vision cards offer. So strictly speaking, as a character, I think he probably is more around that B or B+, but there's certain things in the game which absolutely make him rise to the top, and he will be a substantially good unit for quite some time because of it. Now, very briefly, talking about that unique item, Al's Chalk Case, this is a different character with or without this item entirely. When you have this equipped on him, he gets defense and spirit debuff resistance of 100% as long as his HP is above 70%, meaning you cannot break his defense or spirit at all. He also gets a 30% attack buff here, which I'll be honest is probably enough attack that you will not have to equip in a weapon. I recommend not equipping a weapon, to be honest, but also gives him a hate of 5 and increases the HP of 15%. Very different character with this equipped versus not equipped. Now, the passive abilities, Lightning Rod. This is one that you probably want to have on 95% of the time. This is an increased chance to be targeted of 5, increases defense of 12, but that's why the accessory is so exceptionally important, that should you want to have hate on him, you can still have the accessory on him, but you can actually pick 2 other passives if you really wanted to. You don't need this one to make him work. I obviously recommend it. 10 hate, because he has no way to regenerate it, is very powerful, and it will be the staple of your builds. But after that, you really can pick and choose what you want to use here. Shadowrunner, I love for the agility buff of 12%, as well as that little bit extra luck. But at the end of the day, it's also map dependent what you want to do with movement. Some maps have that little height difference between your teammates that if you need a jump of 2, Electrocharge is excellent in that it's an attack buff and just a jump of 1. But if you also want to give him the move of 1, you can go Shikuchi instead, and that way you can also change how much he moves, whether 4 squares or 3 squares. So there's some great chess piece potential there, and obviously Divine Protection for that AoE resistance does have a time and place. I think it's niche, but overall you have a lot of versatility here to pick between 6 different passives. Now, the counter abilities here, again, I went with a D on this grade. Brace here is unique to him, but it's not unique at all. It's literally the same as Sword Guard. It's a 20% chance to proc, reduces damage taken by 30%. That's honestly not a bad counter for tanks. It's really not a bad counter. It's just very, very mundane, as I said, and the fact that you have 2 out of your 3 counters being exactly the same means there's really no versatility to play with there. So it's not bad, it's just very average. Now, for the main job buffs, he's got 2 of them. He will always prioritize Izumi's Stance, which is the second one here. This is the reduced physical damage 50% for 3 times, but it's also defense penetration of 50 for 3 turns. So he does have some good defense busting potential there. From what I found, he does prioritize the TMR second if you have a TMR equipped, and third, which is a very good buff here, is Expertise of the Alchemist. This is an increase of slash res 25, AoE res 20, and elemental chain resistance of 80% for 3 3 turns. Now I need to play with the math of this a little more, but what I've found so far is that essentially it reduces chain damage by overall about like 17% or so, which is becoming more frequent in terms of what characters can do for chaining. So that's a nice little piece of damage mitigation for something that we're seeing be far more common in offensive attackers, but it also gives him an ability where he will Dispel Protect for 3 turns as well. So overall, 2 very valuable buffs. Now from the main job offensive, he's got some good variety here. Again, 3 strike attacks, 1 pierce attack, 2 of them are single target, 2 of them are AoE. The max range he can hit from is 3 squares away. So he's got some good versatility in terms of blends of what he has to offer. Focused Fist is okay. It's a 15 AP ability, nothing wrong with that. Stalagmite Transmutation, actually, in my opinion, is not a very good ability. The defense and spirit buff is only for 1 turn, and frankly, I have not seen him use this very often at all, if only because the strike damage will almost always exceed the pierce damage. The only time I've ever seen him use this ability in auto so far was when I was going against a Warrior of Light who has a massive pierce weakness. So this ability, almost a wash in how irrelevant it is. But Boulder Blockade and Armored Flash Kick, the bottom 2, are excellent abilities for what he does. Boulder Blockade is a break physical barrier AoE for targets, also reduces their counter chance 100%, and it's also an agility break of 25% and a 60% attack break. So exceptionally good for reducing the enemy turn order, reducing how much damage those physical damage dealers do. And then Armored Flash Kick is the 100% guaranteed hit chance. It will also dispel all debuffs to himself. So if he has healing power down, let's say an element resistance and peril, 38% or whatever, agility down, that will dispel it. So obviously really great for some survivability, but also restores 25% HP, and healing power will affect that percentage and will increase it. So main kit, really only 2 of these abilities I think are really strong. The other 2 you're probably not going to see as much, but these 2 abilities themselves absolutely make him work as intended. Now the sub job, don't really love this to be honest. Stun Grenade is a TP ability that has no modifier on it, really more for PvE usage or maybe against some of those evade teams where he'll opt for this if he has a 0% hit chance. But even then, I don't love it because it's 4 squares of range as opposed to 3, and I wouldn't want him using this in lieu of maybe another buff if someone came in a range. Double Blow is okay. Double hit ability, but in my opinion, inferior to Armored Flash Kick. It's the same modifier. This is really more for some potential strike damage synergy, I think, and maybe some PvE content, but overall not a terribly strong sub job. Now, Ninja, I don't like this at all. There's really only one thing here. It's Dream Within a Dream that does have some PvE potential where it is a triple hit ability. So should you need to fit him into your team somehow to maybe draw the enemy a certain way because that innate hate, maybe get some upside here. That's really the only thing I like on this job. And then you get to the Knight sub job, which I think is probably the best out of the 3. Divine Healing is still, in my opinion, one of my favorite buffs. Increases HP of 20% for 3 turns. It's also another type of debuff res, which is all element resistance, 100% for 3 turns. And the healing power 30, which will affect his self-heal on that attack on the main job. So really like this buff. In terms of abilities, I only like Arm Break here. The rest of them, both Power Break and Speed Break, are redundant to that Boulder ability where he already has an attack and agility debuff. He doesn't need them on these sub-jobs. It's really just the disable potential that I think you'll ever want to use here. But even then, very limited for what he has on the sub-jobs. Which brings us finally to the Limit Break. And this is a good Limit Break. It's a double hit, only 38 AP, 3 squares away for the 200% modifier. So he will always opt to Limit Break as opposed to something else in the main jobs there. It will temporarily increase his attack by 50% for the ability, and the 67% chance to inflict slow, which is really nice, where if you can reduce the enemy turn order, means less hits that he takes, means more survivability. There's some good trickle-down effects there. Now the Mastery ability, nothing special here, 10% HP, 10 defense, it's fine, but nothing crazy. But the Dream ability, very, very good. This is where he gets the 15 unit resistance and also the perma 15% physical damage increase. Now, from what I can tell, I think this is dispellable, actually. At least I've seen the text pop up when people have used Dispel on him. Whether or not it actually applies mathematically, I still need to test that, but either way, this is a nice damage increase for him. Now, for the TMR review, this is actually a very good TMR in my opinion. It is an armor type, great amount of HP on it. It's an attack 40% buff for himself and teammates, and will absorb 20% of the damage you do for yourself and teammates. Now for Alphonse in particular, I don't know if I love this just because I don't know if I ever want him moving horizontally to teammate. You really want him moving forward as much as possible. But as far as TMRs go, many of you might think of the Urel TMR here, but hers is a cloth type. His is an armor type. So 2 totally different people that can equip it. Sure, hers also has 10% more HP restoration, but Al's has the 40% attack. Either way, even if not necessarily great for Al, I love the TMR conceptually speaking. Now, for the general thoughts overall, really straightforward unit, very easy to use. The buffs are self-sufficient. His AI should not be complicated. The hate 10 with his item has shown great things where you don't have to waste a buff to get the hate. You cannot dispel it from an enemy to get rid of that hate. So you can take 5 hits before someone else will get targeted instead. Overall, that has proven to be very, very effective. Not unbeatable though, can definitely poke some holes. I do personally think magic is the spot to expose, again, given the lack of spirit or any kind of magic shield there. Obviously, physical barrier breaks greatly neuter his survivability because it gets rid of his physical barrier. And the low accuracy makes it so that he can miss even non-evade units. I've gone against some teams that have had units that really shouldn't be evasive and he misses them somehow anyway, so you have to really make sure that you gear him for some of that accuracy, but you can also certainly expose him that way. Now, similar to Snow, a lot of you probably see some similarities already. You don't want to totally abandon the offensive output. You obviously want to end the battle relatively quickly, but in addition to that, you do have that great physical bulk to rely on, the undispellable hate, the strike damage, the utility-driven main kit to reduce the incoming damage, where he's got the attack breaks, slow and agility breaks, the dispel debuffs to self, some of that siphon of the healing abilities. So overall, a lot of similarities there, but he really does vastly benefit from external sources. Chalk Case in particular, the Believers in Brotherhood vision card, and the other strike vision cards, which we'll see in just a second here. Potentially buffs from other strike units, where again we talked about that third priority buff is the AoE resistance. Well, if you can't give that to himself, both Ed and Preen do have AoE resistance buffs, which do synergize really well with that strike team. And Resnick in particular, as the lightning support, does exceptionally well with Alphonse. Number one, because she goes with this Believers of Brotherhood vision card, but two, she's a lightning unit, so all the mono element lightning cards go very, very well. And since he doesn't have that courage, the re-raise, that big massive self-heal, once you get him low, he doesn't have a lot of tools to really survive, and her being able to pocket him a little bit, and you talk about that devout buff, which is the unit resistance of 30 and the debuff res of 30 and the insta heals and everything, goes really well. So vastly benefits from the balance of what they offer him. Now, on that topic of the job-based edition cards, yes, this is the moment many of us have been waiting for. 5 of these are out in the game. The 6th, Brothers and Sisters, is coming out not Wednesday, but the week after. Without these 6 vision cards, Alphonse is a much worse unit. But what they've done to entice these potential 5th units, these vision cards are exceptionally strong. You got 2 agility cards, AoE res, unit res, 2 different strike modifiers, 2 different types of missile res, slash res, dexterity, crit damage, crit rate, literally everything to well-round Alphonse out, in addition to the other strike characters, but he is a different unit when you're not leaning into some of these. Absolutely, if you have not been building these yet and you're anticipating using Alphonse, you're probably going to struggle a lot more trying to force him to use some of those lightning-oriented mono-element vision cards. Now, for the Esper synergies, being a tank, you do want to slightly change things up here. Number one priority is matchup specific. If you need a certain kind of elemental resistance, like Dark Res for Demon Wall, for example, if you see a lot of Sephiroth, go with that every single time. After that, really agility specific, making sure he moves and has a turn order you want. And then I would say accuracy, probably the third most important, because you do need some form in these kits somewhere. After that, you can go for lightning attack up and then round him out by that magic or spirit res or the strike res if you want to do turn him positive. And there's a slew of Espers to potentially focus on here. Odin, probably still one of my favorites. The agility, missile and slash res, human killer, very fast, overall very well rounded. But Death Machine's got the fire res and the defense. MAX has crit evade, slash res and defense. Golden Armin, defense, crit evade, slash res. Phoenix has strike res, defense as well, crit evade as well. Demon Wall, as I mentioned, dark res, light res, slash res. Freesis is spirit and crit evade. Titan is accuracy, spirit, and pierce modifier, which might help that pierce attack in the main job. Dark Odin is very, very fast as the human killer and the magic res or missile res if you wanted it. Aegion is both pierce res and magic res, and the lightning attack up, so some modifiers. Dark Ramu I like a lot here, very fast Esper with the lightning attack, slash res, and human killer. And finally, even a regular Ramu, although he's a magic oriented Esper, regular Ramu has accuracy, lightning attack, and strike res, all great things that he wants. So you have a vast option to pick from here where you don't have to worry terribly about modifiers. These are probably some of my favorites to start off with in terms of boxing, but you probably won't go wrong at some point in the game if you reso him with all of these. Now, for the weapon optimization, I really do think the chalk case is really all you need. Tanks typically don't want to equip some kind of weapon. You would prefer them to have that bulkiness, but Owl does walk that fine line where you do want to kill things quickly, so not the end of the world, but this at the very least, that 30% attack, It's not the end of the world if you don't equip one. But specifically speaking about weapons, my least favorite to favorite, I think Gilded Devils might be the best just regular fist. He does not benefit from these conditions at all. 182 attack, you could go for the crit build. Obviously, you could use some help there. Strike attack 15 is basically all you get. It's okay. Not amazing though, not recommended. I do think Tiger Fangs, though, is a good one here. Again, that 10 AoE resistance is that nice blend of survivability while giving him the attack stats and the strike modifier. But my favorite of all the weapon optimization is the lightweight Steel Fist. This is a TMR from Lamega. Again, number one, if you want to bulk him up in that first and second slot, you can do so. Still retain the attack stat here with the trust stones you equip, but it also gives you the 20 accuracy permanent as part of this weapon. So there's a lot of things that I really like about just putting this as like a stat stick on the TMR slot and min-maxing him that way. But that's the Alphonse character review in a nutshell. Again, not a lot to necessarily dive deep on. There's some cool new mechanics they've kind of given him that many other tanks don't really get. He is a crucial piece of a potential strike meta that JP saw and will likely see echoed to some effect here in Global. I don't know if as many people have gone as crazy on building up characters like Perrine, for instance, to kind of go with that, or how many people have pulled all the fist-based vision cards. But this is a character that is exceptionally strong and will likely be featured across a variety of the ladder, probably more in the top end of the game though, more so than the middle of the ladder. I don't necessarily think he's great against Sephiroth, for instance, but as far as tanks go, he's probably one of the better ones you can put in front of Sephiroth as well. But that's all my thoughts, at least in a nutshell for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to you all soon.